Good morning. This presentation deals with the 15-minute city, also known as the Ulez city or Ulez zone, and deals with the C40 agenda. This presentation is brought to you by Denied Truth. The information in this presentation is presented for informational purposes. It is based on current legislation, but ultimately it is the viewer's responsibility to ensure that any action he or she may take as a result of this presentation is lawful and legal. The author and/or web hoster of this information is not responsible for any action that you may or may not take as a result. What is Ulez? The Ultra Emission Zone charge, also known as the Ulez charge, was set up by the Mayor of London and launched on the 8th of April 2019. And the aim of the Ulez is supposedly to improve air quality in London. And the current Ulez zones are being expanded, and this is not restricted to London. In fact, this is a global agenda to meet climate goals to reduce CO2 emissions and reduce carbon emissions around the world. At least that's what they would have you believe. What is Euro emission standards? Okay, what Euro emission standards is your vehicle, to be more precise? If your vehicle was manufactured on the 31st of December 1992, it will be Euro 1. If it was manufactured the 1st of January 1997, it will be Euro 2. If manufactured the 1st of January 2001, it'll be Euro 3. If manufactured 1st of January 2006, it'll be Euro 4. And if manufactured 1st of January 2011, it'll be Euro 5. If manufactured the September 1st, 2015, it will be Euro 6. Those are the target mandates. However, many manufacturers produced vehicles to the higher standard before the higher standard became law. The government would have you believe that if your vehicle is not Ulez compliant, you need to replace your vehicle. This is 100% incorrect. Any vehicle which is manufactured at a certain target date, whatever that date may be, irregardless of the mandate, will be legal and non-conforming. And you may ask yourself, well, what does this mean? What is legal and non-conforming? Well, as an example, if you have a vehicle, say a 1929 Ford, it does not have seat belts because they were not required at that time. If a police officer pulls you over and you state, I'm driving a historic vehicle, right? It's an unaltered historic vehicle. The vehicle did not have seat belts, and therefore the vehicle, and therefore you, are legally not required to wear the seat belt. As a secondary example, let's say when a subdivision is developed back in the 1920s, they may have had a offset from the highway or the road of 20 feet. And, okay, the road is manufactured, the sidewalk's put in, the sidewalk wasn't there, so now your house is not within the 20-foot requirement, maybe it's only 15 feet, and then they decide to change the mandate to say that your house has to be 30 feet from the road. Does this mean you have to now move your house? No, your house is legal and non-conforming. Just as if your house was wired in the 1920s, it probably should be updated electrically for the electrical code. However, your house is legal and non-conforming, and provided you don't make any major electrical updates, you're perfectly fine. I hope with that illustration you can now see that even if your vehicle is not Ulez compliant, you do not need to dispose of your vehicle. They tell you to be Ulez compliant, your vehicle must be either Euro 4 standard if you drive a petrol vehicle, or also known as a gasoline vehicle, and Euro 6 standard if you drive a diesel vehicle. Petrol vehicles first registered with DVLA from 2005 are often Ulez compliant anyway, and most diesel vehicles registered after 2015 are also Ulez compliant. It should be noted that many governments around the world have federally owned vehicles. Those federally owned vehicles do not necessarily have insurance, registration, nor do they meet any emission standards. Therefore, one would beg the question, if all are equal under the law and no one is above the law, as covered in my legal maxims presentation, then how are you forced to do something when the government is not? Is my car Ulez exempt? Most diesel vehicles after 2014 will be Euro 4 compliant and therefore exempt. Most petrol vehicles after January 2005 will be Euro 4 compliant and therefore exempt. Some manufacturers complied with these higher emission standards before they were actually brought into force, and therefore your vehicle may be exempt even if it was manufactured before the target date. How can I tell if my vehicle meets these requirements? You can look up your vehicle on the internet to see which Euro standard it complies with, but ultimately you don't care. Or maybe you do. If your car doesn't meet the Euro 4 requirement, you can write to the diesel manufacturer and request a certificate of conformity by requesting the exhaust data, basically. You're looking for the NOx value to be less than 0.08 per kilometer. You would then send a copy of this report to the Transport for London, as well as the DVLA, and ask them to update the records for your vehicle. You may also wish to send a copy of this to the local city council. And you would ask the DVLA to update your V5 to reflect this update. You would then send this data to the council office where you live or work, and also any area that you expect to be passing through, which is generally your local city council, and also potentially to any place that you intend to visit. What this will do is it's now on record that your vehicle is Ulez compliant or Ulez exempt, and therefore if they send you a ticket in the mail for driving across the city too many times or for any other issue related to these Ulez zones, you will already have informed them, so you should not be getting the ticket. What if my vehicle's too old and doesn't have emissions data? Well, if your vehicle is legal and non-conforming, then you will be okay. If your vehicle, under the law, is 40 years old or older, it is legal and non-conforming, which also means there's no MOT required yearly, no road fund needed to be paid. Also means the police or other law enforcement cannot zap the vehicle to disable its operation. Many viewers may not be aware that the police have a gun-looking device which they can point at any vehicle and pull a trigger, and basically it stops the vehicle. However, if your vehicle is the older coil condenser type, distributor type ignition, it's harder to disable. These vehicles are generally pre-1987 or diesel vehicles that operate on compression and use an electric solenoid to shut the fuel off to stop the engine. If you wish to ensure that your vehicle does not get zapped, and it is one of these older vehicles, you may wish to install the coil in a Faraday cage. What about transfers of the keeper? Well, it has been suggested that you can simply transfer ownership to avoid paying a fine. If you've traveled across the city 99 times and you know at 100 they're going to send you a bill, then you would just transfer the vehicle to somebody new, which would reset the counter for the amount of times you can travel across the city. And although currently there's no limit placed on the amount of times you can change the keeper of the vehicle, this is also not practical as there's many fees involved and paperwork and delays in doing so. One thing to note here is the driver is responsible for the fines applied to a particular vehicle. However, in many cases, someone may own the vehicle and yet they're not the driver. Such examples would be if you're an older person and you have somebody younger or a care worker driving your vehicle. right? They will not be responsible. The driver will not be responsible because the vehicle's registered keeper is in fact you. This would also be true if you had a young son or daughter, teenager, driving your vehicle because they did not have one of their own. Ultimately, you, as the registered keeper, the parent, would be responsible for these tickets and or fines unless you do the preliminary paperwork up front to avoid them. Many people have resorted to destruction of property of these Ulez cameras. You can see in the first photograph somebody chopped the cable. The second one, somebody decided to put a box over it or a bag over it, which looks like it's from Sainsbury's. Some people have opted to paint these flower boxes, which will prevent you from traveling down a certain particular road, and other people have resorted to actually removing the boxes. Some people have also taken to chopping down the post and or dismantling other infrastructure which operates these Ulez cameras. It should be noted that these cameras cost money to install, and the municipality is spending that money to install those cameras and imposing it on your council tax. This is not something you requested, and since you vote in your government, if your government is not representing you, then you certainly have the right to some sort of legal protest. I have a separate webinar that deals specifically with council tax, and it is expanding as information does. However, the current presentation dealing with council tax is quite informative and does cover most of the legal legislation which you can use to fight council tax. I certainly do not condone destroying property. If you're not familiar with these clean air zones, they currently have signs posted. Now, there is one town that said we don't like these Ulez clean air zones, and we don't like these photographic things being used against us. And what they supposedly did was stand up and tell the local government, you don't represent us, get out. And they formed their own local government. In this case, 70,000 clean air zone fines were written off by the local municipality. So the cash cow scheme brings council £50,000 in that 1 year. It should also be noted that when these cameras run your plates, they can't do it directly. So they contact DVLA and they get this information and then they send you a bill. Well, the city council who runs these cameras basically pays a fee to the DVLA to retrieve this information. This is unlawful because the only time that information should be disclosed is in fact if you've committed a crime, which means they have violated your privacy and the privacy rules and laws that protect you. So you may have a legal claim in that regard as well. Bingham City Council said in the 18-month period since the start of the enforcement of clean air zones in 2021, there have been 69,114 penalty charge notices written off so far, which is around 6% of the total issued. Well, if they can write them off in that town, you certainly have the right to refuse to pay them in your town. Is a Ulez 15-minute city legal? No, technically it is not. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and to restrict where you park your car or drive your vehicle is directly impacting the time it takes you to get to work or get your kids to school or some other activity, and walking or cycling to work or school may not be realistic given the distance. That's pretty much it. Okay, if you are restricted from commerce and you're restricted from your job, then they are restricting you to life, liberty, and happiness, which is a violation of your fundamental rights. And examples of primary legislation which protect those rights are the Act of Will and Mar 1688, the Bill of Rights, the Coronation Oath Act, and the Act of Settlement 1700. There is one additional act which will also protect your rights, and it is called the Union with England Act 1707, that all the subjects of the United Kingdom and Great Britain shall, from and after the Union, have full freedom and intercourse of trade, navigation, and form any port or place said in the United Kingdom and the Dominions. So right there, intercourse does not mean sexual intercourse. Intercourse means commerce and an activity, for those that are not familiar. Okay, and any act of communication and all other rights and privileges and advantages which belong to the subjects of either kingdom. So you can freely travel across England and other places without this restriction. And this act is 1707, which is still primary legislation. There's a difference between primary legislation and secondary legislation. Primary legislation was created by Parliament. And if you create something, no one else has the right to change it. So since this United with England Act was 1707 and created by Parliament, then how does the local government have the right to trample on these rights? They do not have the authority because they're a lower form of government. This will now end this Ulez problem. The Union of England Act 1707 goes on further and says that all the laws and statutes in either kingdom, so far as they are contrary to or inconsistent with the terms of the Articles, or any of them, shall from and after the Union cease, which means stop, and become void, and shall be declared to be by the respective parliaments of said kingdoms. So that's telling you right there that up until 1707, the laws that are inconsistent with this are in fact void. So that means that everyone now has the chance or the opportunity to have trade and commerce, if you will, as well as to do business with, which they call intercourse, with anyone. So anybody that's trying to pass a law that's inconsistent with this, such as the Ulez cities and this other further stuff that they're going to try to implement, is an actual violation of primary legislation. There has been a request for review and submitted by High Court by the London boroughs of Bexley, Bromley, Hillingdon, and Harrow, plus Surrey County and Council, looking into challenge the Ulez cities. And there was a submission done to the City of London for the feasibility as to the grounds as to whether or not implementing Ulez cities was in fact a practical or profitable idea. And they submitted it based on 5 specific grounds. They were failure to comply with relevant statutory requirements. Number 2, unlawful failure to consider the expected compliance rates of the Outer London. 3, the proposed scrappage scheme was not consulted upon. Number 4, failure to carry out any cost-benefit analysis. And inadequate consultation. And what happened with this, there's a scrappage scheme I mentioned in here, and what they're offering is that you get paid something for scrapping your existing vehicle. And this was done as an incentive to convince people that they should get newer vehicles. Now, it may be certain situations where a person simply can't afford to get a newer vehicle, or perhaps their vehicle was retrofitted for a certain application, and to scrap that vehicle and get a new vehicle and get it re-retrofitted would not be cost effective. If the 5 boroughs can challenge the legality of this Ulez implementation, then all boroughs can do the same. What happened, as I found out, was the Ulez cameras were ordered prior to any of this consultation even being done. So some company that has license plate recognition cameras got very well compensated, if you will, and these cameras were purchased. And if you notice, when they were installed was right after COVID. I should advise the viewer that cleaning up the environment, in fact, is not the end game. And we will get into that in the next couple of slides. Now, this legal challenge from these 5 boroughs was based on the 5 questions that I outlined in the previous slide. And the court, there was a petition put into the court, or an application, to find out if the court would even let the people proceed. And the court found that the failure to comply with the relevant statutory requirements had not been met. So that's 1 point towards allowing this hearing to take place. Unlawful failure to consider the expected compliance rates in the Outer London. And third, the proposed scrappage scheme was not consulted upon. So 3 out of the 5 arguments, the court agreed that there is a legal basis to bring this matter before court. And this court hearing is expected to proceed in the near future. Now, what they want to do is have this emissions charge thing go through, and the idea actually is they want to expand the ultra emission zone and tackle more of the dirtiest vehicles. That's what they claim. And they say they can modify the Ulez to make it even more impact and reduce emissions, extending current zones beyond the north and south circular roads to cover the whole of Greater London, introducing new, tighter emission standards, charging a low level to further reduce the emissions from the road based on transport. But if you look at point number 3, it says low-level emission charge, a low daily charge across all of Greater London for all but the cleanest vehicles, example, zero-emission vehicles, capable of zero-emission vehicles. Okay, so they're targeting all vehicles, okay, that are capable or zero-emission vehicles. This could work as a nudge to behavior to change, a similar way to the 10p, which is 10 pence charge for plastic bags. And then it says next generation charging. There's a scheme for incorporating existing schemes and charge a single charge per mile. Distance-based charging. This would indicate then that even if you have an electric vehicle or a vehicle that complies with the ultra-low emission standards, eventually that's going to be scrapped. Road tax will probably be reduced or eliminated, but you will be charged based per mile. And some indication indicates that they're going to charge roughly 12 pounds per mile. Other indications say, and that would be a daily charge. Other indications indicate that they would charge 10 pence per mile. And some people say it could be as high as $1 or £1 per mile. So even if you've bought into this ultra low emission, I'm going to get a cleaner vehicle scheme, eventually this is not going to pan out. And even if you have an electric vehicle, it's not going to pan out. Now, yesterday I was in the town and I consulted someone and I asked them what they pay for their electricity rate. And they said they pay 30 pence per unit. Whether that's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. But there is another YouTuber who forwarded me some information that he was driving from somewhere to London, approximately 200 kilometers or 200 miles, whichever way it was, and he was having a big issue in finding a charging port, a charging place to charge his vehicle. He did eventually find one. And they were charging, and I can confirm this, 60 pence per unit. And the per unit is usually based on per kilowatt hour. Now, because we don't have the infrastructure to have rapid charging everywhere, there could be 10 or 15 vehicles waiting to charge. And if you charge your vehicle, even at a fast charge port, and it takes maybe an hour or two to charge a vehicle, depending on your battery capacity, and you have to wait for 2 or 3 vehicles to charge before you could be waiting anywhere from 2 to maybe 8 hours to have your vehicle charged on a trip. This now it becomes not effective because maybe your whole trip should take 4 hours and you charge halfway through, but you have to wait 4 hours, and then you go home and you have to charge on the way home perhaps and wait another 2 hours. So now your 4-hour trip is now taking you 6 hours plus the driving time. This is why the electric vehicle is probably not for everyone. And most electric vehicles, there are exceptions, retrieve probably somewhere between 30 to 40 miles per charge. Now, if you read this document, which is actually page 4 of a larger document, it says vehicles that are ultra low emission capable. Well, this would include a hybrid vehicle. And so a hybrid vehicle typically is a vehicle that has a gasoline engine generator type system or alternator type system, which charges your batteries, and your vehicle, when it's in low speed mode, if we will, driving through local towns, can very often operate on electrics only. However, when the electric's battery charge capacity drops to a certain level, the gasoline or diesel powered vehicle motor would start up to recharge the battery. And if you reach a certain speed and the electric motors can't keep up, then your vehicle is strictly on, in some cases, strictly on the engine alone. And the electric charging circuit charges away, but your vehicle is actually running on either petrol or diesel. So in actual fact, although you may have reduced your cost somewhat as far as traveling goes, 60 pence per kilowatt hour, and you figure you're going to charge up your battery bank, you may want to reconsider, is it even practical to charge this vehicle at a charging port? And this brings back the argument, well, okay, if I have an electric vehicle, perhaps it's only usable to go to and from work, provided I don't travel any more than 30 to 40 miles round trip, because you can charge at home for a lot less. And like I say, the infrastructure isn't around, it hasn't been implemented to charge multiple vehicles. And if they turn around and do a charge per mile, a charge per distance, as they indicate in this document, it's not going to make any difference whether you have a gasoline-powered vehicle or a electric hybrid vehicle or a totally 100% electric vehicle. Now, one of the things that we want to bring in, or I would like to bring forward, is that blockchain is a cryptocurrency financial services company. And they indicate that on the system here on the screen. You can do the search and find this out for yourself. But if they implement this digital currency, as they intend to do globally, the problem will become that as you drive, when they implement this charge per distance, charge per mile, charge per kilometer system, if they have this digital currency in place, which I strongly recommend everybody refuse, then they will simply deduct it from your account. Because with these Ulez cameras, if they scan your license plate, they will automatically be able to access your account and withdraw the funds. So visiting grandma 200 miles away might be not cost effective anymore. And if they implement this 12 pounds flat rate per day every time you use your vehicle, which of course will be picked up by the cameras, and you have to travel to work, it's going to cost you $12 a day to work, and most people work 200 days of the year. This is going to get very expensive, and people will be rethinking whether or not they want to go to work and or whether they want to take any leisure trips to have a mini vacation for a couple of days or even for a couple of hours. It's also been stated that blockchain does not deal with cryptocurrencies. However, if you deal with blockchain technology, you can simply look it up, and it says a system that records transactions, especially those made in cryptocurrency. and maintain across computers that are linked on a peer-to-peer network. So this would potentially implement anybody that has a digital wallet. Now, there are some digital wallets that are not directly hooked up to a computer, and they're a solid-state type device which you carry. However, because it is digital, it would require some access to the internet, and we all know that the internet transactions can be traced through what's called a MAC address or an IP address. And although someone might argue that VPN, a virtual private network, would eliminate this problem, at the end of the day, even VPNs can be hacked. I mean, a lot of people used to say that the digital satellite television systems couldn't be hacked, and they were hacked for a number of years. And the more things that are on digital type system, it should be self-evident. We have antivirus programs, we have anti-malware programs, we have cookie elimination programs, and all these things infect your computers, so why wouldn't they be able to eventually at some point affect your cryptocurrency? So I would strongly suggest that everyone who wishes to maintain the current system of somewhat of anonymity, when they purchase anything, start withdrawing their cash from the banks, and we can continue to use cash where it's accepted, and simply refuse to work with the people that do not wish to accept cash. And do not put your cash back in the bank, because the bank can change your digital currency from your fiat currency we currently use. And if they do that, then the fiat currency, the paper money, is gone for good. They can change the legal tender because they're the government. This presentation has been brought to you by Denied Truth. We can be reached at deniedtruth@yahoo.com or at the Telegram group listed below. We have now set up a Telegram group for the United Kingdom, and it is separated into subjects. We have set up a separate one for Canada, and it will be separated into subjects. We have set one up for the United States, and it too will be separated into subjects. And we have a general Denied Truth Telegram group, which deals with legal issues which affect everyone. If you need specific help on a specific issue, and if I can be of assistance, I will try to guide you in the right direction. However, keep in mind that I don't work for free, but I am all for helping people, and that's the purpose of this group. It's not any sort of claim to fame or in any way an effort to collect prize or anything like that. The purpose of this Denied Truth group is to correct the wrongdoings that have been going on long enough. It is my hope that with the Denied Truth Telegram groups, as well as this presentation and others, that we can enlighten the people to take the appropriate action to make the necessary changes within the system. We will cover a variety of topics. However, if you have a specific topic that you would like addressed, please send your comments or suggestions to the deniedtruth@yahoo.com address below. I thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation, and I look forward to bringing you additional presentations in the future which will deal with a variety of other issues which I feel are very relevant to the current situation within the world. Thank you again. Have a good day.